Once upon a time, in a small, quiet village, there lived an old farmer named Samuel. Samuel was a very hard-working man. All his life, he woke up before the sun and worked in his fields until the moon appeared. Because of his hard work, his farm was green and healthy. However, Samuel had a big problem. He had 3 sons, Jack, Tom, and Peter. They were strong and healthy young men, but they were extremely lazy. Every morning, Samuel would shout, "Wake up, my sons! It is time to work in the field. The sun is up." But the sons would only turn over in their beds. Jack would say, "5 more minutes, Father." Tom would say, "It is too hot outside today," and Peter would simply continue to sleep. Instead of helping their father, the 3 sons spent their days lying under the big banyan tree, playing games, and dreaming of becoming rich without doing any work. They wanted money, but they did not want to earn it. As the years passed, Samuel became old and weak. His back hurt, and his hands shook. He could no longer work as hard as before. Slowly, the beautiful green farm began to dry up. Weeds grew where crops used to be. The family started to have less money and less food. Samuel looked at his dry fields and sighed. He was very worried. He thought to himself, "What will happen to my sons when I am gone? They do not know the value of work. They will starve." One cold evening, Samuel fell very ill. The village doctor came and shook his head. "I am sorry," the doctor said. "Samuel does not have much time left." Samuel lay in his bed, looking at the ceiling. He knew he had to do something to save his sons. He had to teach them a lesson before it was too late. Suddenly, a clever idea came to his mind. He smiled weakly and asked his neighbor to call his 3 sons. "Come here," Samuel whispered. "I have something important to tell you." The 3 sons, Jack, Tom, and Peter, walked slowly into their father's room. The room was dim, lit only by a small candle on the table. The air felt heavy and sad. They stood around the wooden bed, looking down at their father. Samuel looked very pale and fragile. For the first time, the sons felt a little ashamed. They looked at their father's rough hands. Those hands had worked every day for 40 years to feed them, while their own hands were soft and unused. "Father, we are here," Jack said softly. Samuel opened his eyes slowly. He took a deep, shaky breath. "My dear sons," he whispered, his voice sounding like dry leaves rustling in the wind. "I do not have much time left in this world, but before I go, I must share a secret with you, a secret I have kept hidden for many years." The sons leaned closer. Their laziness disappeared for a moment, replaced by curiosity. "What secret, Father?" asked Tom. Samuel coughed weakly. He paused to gather his strength. "Listen carefully," he said. "Many years ago, during the times of our ancestors, there was a great war. To protect our family's wealth, my grandfather took a large chest filled with gold coins and precious jewels. The word gold made the sons' eyes widen. Peter, the youngest, stepped forward. "Gold! Where is it, Father?" he asked eagerly. "It is buried." Samuel gasped for air. "It is buried somewhere in our large field. I wanted to dig it up myself, but I became too old and weak. Now, it belongs to you. You must find it." The 3 sons looked at each other. Their sadness was quickly replaced by excitement. They imagined a life of luxury. They imagined buying new clothes, big houses, and delicious food without ever working again. "Where exactly is it buried?" Jack asked urgently. "Is it near the old well, or near the banyan tree?" Samuel tried to speak, but his voice was fading. He raised a trembling finger towards the window that overlooked the dark, empty fields. "Dig," he whispered one last time. "You must dig." Then Samuel's hand dropped to the bed. His eyes closed and his breathing stopped. The old farmer had passed away peacefully, taking the exact location of the treasure to his grave. The room was silent for a minute. The sons were sad that their father was gone, but their minds were already racing. The secret of the hidden gold was burning in their thoughts. They were not thinking about the funeral. They were thinking about the field. "We are rich," Tom whispered. "We just have to find it." A few days after Samuel's funeral, the 3 sons were ready. They did not want to waste a single moment. Early in the morning, while the village was still sleeping, Jack, Tom, and Peter went to the market. They bought the strongest shovels and spades they could find. They marched to the large, dry field that belonged to their father. The field was huge, stretching from their house all the way to the river. It looked brown and lifeless. "Listen," Jack said, acting like the leader. "The field is very big. We must be systematic. I will dig the north side, Tom will dig the middle, and Peter will dig the south side. We cannot miss a single inch." "Agreed," said Tom and Peter. "Let's find that gold." For the first time in their lives, the lazy sons began to work. They pushed their shovels into the hard, dry ground. The soil was tough because it had not been farmed for a long time. They had to use all their strength to break the earth. Clang! Crunch! The sound of metal hitting the soil filled the air. By noon, the sun was high in the sky. It was a scorching hot day. Sweat rolled down their foreheads and soaked their shirts. Their hands, which were used to holding soft pillows, began to hurt. Blisters formed on their palms. Their backs ached terribly. Normally, they would have stopped working after 10 minutes. They would have run to the shade of the banyan tree. But today was different. The thought of the gold coins kept them going. "I think I hit something," Peter shouted suddenly. Jack and Tom ran over to him. They dug frantically with their hands, but it was just a large rock. Disappointed, they returned to their spots and continued digging. They worked all day, from sunrise to sunset. They worked the next day, and the day after that. The neighbors were shocked. "Look," one neighbor whispered. "Is that Samuel's lazy sons? They are working harder than any farmer in the village." "Perhaps they have finally become responsible," said another neighbor. The sons did not care what the neighbors thought. They only cared about the treasure. They turned over every piece of soil. They dug deep holes. They broke every large stone. A week passed. The entire field, which was once flat and hard, was now completely dug up. The soil was loose, soft, and turned over perfectly. It looked like a field ready for planting. But there was a big problem. The 3 brothers stood in the middle of the field, covered in dirt and exhausted. They looked around. There was no chest. There were no jewels. There was not a single gold coin. Jack threw his shovel on the ground angrily. "Father lied to us," he shouted. "There is no gold here." Peter sat down on the ground, almost crying. "We worked for nothing. We wasted our energy. My back feels like it is broken." Tom kicked a pile of dirt. This was a trick, a cruel trick by an old man. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the freshly dug field. The brothers were tired, angry, and empty-handed. They did not know that they had accidentally done the most important part of farming. The 3 brothers sat on the edge of the field, looking at the dark, loose soil. They were tired, and their bodies were sore. They felt foolish for believing the story about the buried treasure. Just then, an old man from the village walked by. He was a friend of their father, Samuel. He saw the 3 young men sitting sadly and noticed the field. The field looked amazing because the soil was perfectly turned and soft. The old man walked up to them and asked, "Why do you look so sad, my sons? You have done a wonderful job. I have never seen this field look so ready for farming." Jack looked up and sighed. "We are not farmers, sir. We are gold hunters. Our father told us there was gold buried here. We dug up every inch, but we found nothing. It was all a lie." The old man smiled wisely. He looked at the sky and then at the soil. "Well," he said, "I do not know about gold coins, but I do know that the rainy season will start in a few days. You have already done the hardest part of the work. The soil is soft and ready." He paused and looked at them seriously. "Since you have already dug the field, why not plant some seeds? If you leave it now, the weeds will grow back, and your hard work will be wasted. But if you plant seeds, at least you might get some food." The brothers looked at each other. They were still angry, but the old man's words made sense. They hated the idea of wasting all their hard work. "He is right," muttered Tom. "We have already suffered in the sun for a week. We might as well throw some seeds in the ground." "Fine," said Peter. "Let's just plant corn and wheat, but after that I am never working in this field again." Reluctantly, the brothers went to the market again. This time, instead of shovels, they bought sacks of corn and wheat seeds. They returned to the field and scattered the seeds over the soft soil. They did it quickly and without much care, just to finish the job. A few days later, the clouds gathered and the rain began to fall. It rained for days. The water soaked into the loose earth, reaching the new seeds. The brothers went back to their lazy habits. They slept late and sat under the banyan tree. They tried to forget about the fake treasure and their father's lie. But nature was working silently. Under the soil, the seeds began to sprout. Green shoots pushed through the earth, reaching for the sun. One morning, a few weeks later, Jack walked past the field and stopped in his tracks. He rubbed his eyes. He could not believe what he saw. The brown, empty field was now a sea of bright, healthy green crops swaying in the breeze. Weeks turned into months. The sun shone brightly, and the rain fell at the right times. Slowly, the green crops began to change color. They turned into a beautiful, golden yellow. The wheat was tall and strong. The corn was thick and juicy. It was the best crop the village had seen in years. The field looked like a sea of gold waving in the wind. The three brothers stood in front of the field. They were amazed. "We need to cut the crops now," Jack said. This time, he did not sound tired. He sounded excited. The brothers worked together to harvest the crops. They filled many carts with their wheat and corn. They took the harvest to the village market to sell. Because the quality of their crops was excellent, the merchants fought to buy them. They paid a very high price. By the end of the day, the brothers had sold everything. Jack held a heavy leather bag in his hands. He opened it. Inside, there were hundreds of shining silver and gold coins. Tom and Peter looked at the money with wide eyes. "We are rich!" Peter cheered. Suddenly, Jack stopped smiling. He looked at the gold coins, and then he looked at his muddy hands. He remembered his father's words. "There is a great treasure buried in the field." Tears came to Jack's eyes. He looked at his brothers and said quietly, "Do you realize what happened? Father did not lie to us." "What do you mean?" Tom asked. "The treasure was in the ground all along," Jack explained. "But it was not a chest of gold. It was the soil itself. We had to dig it, plant it, and work for it to turn it into gold." The brothers finally understood the lesson. Their father knew that if he simply gave them gold, they would spend it and become poor again. But by making them work, he taught them how to earn gold forever. From that day on, Jack, Tom, and Peter were never lazy again. They became the most hard-working and prosperous farmers in the region. They understood that the only real treasure in life is the fruit of hard work.